Is it possible that the lethal shot the Seattle Kraken desperately need is already in our pipeline? One crop of local reporters certainly think so.
You are Locked On Kraken, your daily podcast on the Seattle Kraken, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Seattle hockey fans, welcome to another episode of Locked On Kraken, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We're bringing you your favorite team, the Seattle Kraken, every single day. Erica L. Ayala here, your host of Locked On Kraken, an accredited media member who will be covering the women's and men's hockey tournament in Milano Cortina, the Olympics 2026. Also a contributor over at CBS Sports, where I talk mostly women's basketball. We've got playoffs coming. Seattle Storm has a big game tonight. They win and they're in. So you can catch my work over at cbssports.com, on CBS Sports HQ, and every once in a while on the CBS Sports Network and other CBS affiliates. On today's episode, we're going to go into more new threats, including someone that Sound of Hockey believes could be the sniper that the Seattle Kraken have been waiting for. Then I want to take you to, speaking of Olympic coverage, we're going to reflect on the World Championships, the most recent World Championships win by USA Hockey, and how maybe it mirrors some of the inspiration that the Seattle Kraken can draw from Seattle hockey history. And we will close out today's episode talking about what's on tap. Rookie camp starts this week, and you've got some great opportunities to catch the Seattle Kraken. And yours truly, your host of Locked On Kraken, Joe Dabney, will be joining me next week as well. We'll get into all of that. More new threats. So last episode, I took this theme from The Challenge, MTV's The Challenge, talking about vets versus new threats. That is the new season right now. I'm totally into The Challenge, been watching it for years. I don't know, CT, looks like Turbo is trying to give you the business. That's vets against vets, though. But taking off or ripping off from that theme, I do think this is a perfect theme going into training camp for the Seattle Kraken. There are some new players, young blood, the youths that a lot of us want to see. And yes, I did see a comment on whether Shane Wright is considered a prospect or not, et cetera, et cetera. I have been interchangeably linking him to, and so yes, I completely acknowledge this. I have been interchangeably linking him to the new threats or the prospects, also the NHLers or the kind of veterans, because I think Shane Wright's somewhere in the middle there. I don't really know where he stands. There's a new regime, so to speak, and I'm expecting that he's going to come in even stronger than he did last year. So he's a little bit of I don't want to say an outlier, maybe an X factor, or someone that I'm definitely curious to see on the first days of camp. But our friends over at the Sound of Hockey, they have 4 names that I didn't talk about on yesterday's episode, and that I honestly haven't been talking about too much, at least not leading up to this training camp. We've talked about them in the past for our everydayers and OGers. Thank you so much for joining us here every day. We appreciate you staying subscribed, hopping on the YouTube channel and giving your comments, etc. So please do join us. We're back to 5 days. So we got plenty to fill here. I would love to hear your thoughts and comments here. And so again, I did get that comment, like, is Shane Wright a prospect? Is he not a prospect? I totally get it. And I can see where I've been a little bit, I've caused some confusion. And I think it's because Shane Wright's in this really interesting, he's in an interesting spot. Maybe a spot that Berkeley Catton ? Will be in. What will that look like? But either way, Sound of Hockey always does great work. I love pumping up local media. You've got like the Seattle Kraken fans so blessed with so many great content creators. And John Barr wrote this yesterday, posted. It's entitled 4 Prospects to Watch at Kraken Rookie Camp. And I'm going to save actually the first on their list for last, because it's going to segue into our second stanza, as I like to say, or segment number 2. But Tyson Jugnauth is a player that they have here. Someone, who has a little bit of NCAA experience, spent some time in Portland with the Winterhawks in the WHL, and I loved this from John. Quote, this summer, he took things a step further by moving to Seattle to train with Kraken staff, adding muscle and strength to his game. This is someone who, since joining Portland, John writes, has 179 points in 142 games total. That's regular season and playoffs. We talked about a little bit what Portland was able to do in the postseason. On the ice, he has showcased plenty of skills, is what John talks about, including winning puck battles, holding opponents up defensively, and showing he can translate his WHL success are big things to watch as rookie camp blends into main camp next week. And so, will the additional time with Seattle Kraken staff, the fact that he's also spent that time bulking up a little bit, how will that impact how he's able to enter training camp and shine in training camp? And I want you to remember Tyson in particular, because there's an article on the Seattle Kraken website that talks about maybe what the Kraken are looking for in particular from some of these young guys, or new threats as I call them. And I think Tyson has really set himself up to kind of play the game. So I like this analysis from John about Tyson. Another player they have on here is Lucas Dragicevic. I feel like I'm always saying his name wrong. That's another one I got to practice a little bit more. He is expected to play his first full pro season in North America. Likely going to be an AHL player, though. So that's going to be, as John writes in his piece here, his quote, next hurdle. He is focusing on his defensive play. Camp will be a good test, John writes, on how far he's come. And I love defensive play. So Lucas is someone, Dragicevic is someone I'm going to keep a keen eye out on, because I think the Seattle Kraken have to elevate what they can do defensively, and not just from the defenseman, although Lucas is a right shot defenseman, but really spreading that out among the forwards as well. Now, John does say that he looked out of sorts last year in preseason when he played against Calgary. So John says that's something that he's going to keep an eye on. Again, another player John has on his top four, Carson Rehkopf. Since the team's inception, this is where the cold open comes from. John writes, quote, Kraken fans. So John writes, quote, since the team's inception, Kraken fans have been clamoring for a true goal scorer. Carson Rehkopf might develop to be that guy. He was taken 50th overall in the 2023 draft. And John says, I love this, that his shot has impressed me more than anyone else's in the system. He also does give a nod to Yanni Newman, talking about how he has a lethal shot as well. And I love this analysis. It's not necessarily in my nature to focus on prospects. I love what Sound of Hockey is able to do, our guys on Locked On NHL Prospects. And so I'm always looking for cheat codes in what guys who watch a little bit more junior hockey are able to pick up. My specialty is defense, but specifically outside of the NHL, the international game. And I love seeing how NHL players, how they translate, or if they can translate their game internationally and vice versa. So this is very intriguing to me. Carson as maybe the true goal scorer the Kraken have been dying for. Now, this is still someone that John thinks is going to be in Coachella Valley for the year. But in the OHL, he scored 52 goals in 60 games, nearly a goal per game pace. Followed it, that was in 23-24, and then 42 goals in 57 games in 24-25. So he says that the dip in production shouldn't be a concern, but also mentions that if Carson wants to stick around the NHL, he has to focus on his two-way game, especially if he's going to play for the Kraken. He does say that he thinks Carson probably could have benefited from a little bit of NCAA play, but the AHL will still be a good test for him. So this is someone, Carson Rehkopf, who we are going to keep eyes. We're going to keep eyes on him at training camp and at the rookie portion of training camp. However, John thinks that this is not necessarily someone who's knocking on the door this season. However, you never know. Unfortunately, the Seattle Kraken are no stranger to injuries. And so how many of these guys can play themselves into a reliable spot or a call-up where they get a good look? And as promised, I'm going back to the top of John's list. He started with Oscar Fisker Molgaard, who has played in Sweden, 20-year-old, had 14 assists, 5 goals, 14 assists in 38 SHL games. Now, it says doesn't really leap off the page, but he does factor in that the Swedish Hockey League, a little bit different when it comes to goal scoring than maybe what we expect or what we're used to in a more North American system. And he also talks about that at 20 years old, having experience playing in Sweden and overseas is going to be huge. And again, that's where I take a look at international game. He has played for Denmark in the Olympic qualifiers and the World Championships. Denmark is a team that is going to the Olympics. He is not one of the 6 named for Team Denmark, but we do have a former Seattle Kraken member in Oliver Bjorkstrand. I remember talking to Ollie during his All-Star game appearance. He was asked a lot about the Olympics and Denmark, and so super proud of Oliver Bjorkstrand. I will definitely, while in Italy, catch up with Ollie. I know he doesn't play for us anymore, but I am a big fan of the Maestro. So very cool to see that Oliver Bjorkstrand among the first 6 named. And Oscar Molgaard, does he have a chance perhaps as a young guy? He is still super young, and with NHLers now being a part and being fixtures on these Olympic teams, I'm curious to see how young talent will be utilized, especially for teams like the United States and Canada, who I think are definitely going to swing and sway more towards their NHL talent as opposed to their young talent. And so what does that mean for a player like Matty Beniers or even Joey Decord? Well, only time will tell. I think it's going to be an uphill climb for either one of those guys to make an Olympic roster. But speaking of making Team USA, I am going to take you back down memory lane through an article over on NHL.com written by the amazing Jeff Baker, where he caught up with not 1, not 2, but 3 Kraken players who were really motivated by how Team USA got the World Championship gold medal winning World Championship USA hockey team together with 4 simple numbers. We'll talk about that coming up on today's episode of Locked On Kraken. Today's episode of Locked On Kraken brought to you once again by our friends at FanDuel. The NFL season is officially here, Seattle sports fans, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready to kick off with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your first $5 bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets. And you can use those across the app any way you'd like. So maybe you like using FanDuel for player props. Maybe you want to build a same game parlay or even jump in live as the action unfolds. You can do all of that on FanDuel. I always take a look at the futures bets, and I'm sure we'll talk about them here on the show. But FanDuel makes every game more exciting, whether you're watching your team or just keeping an eye on your fantasy lineup. FanDuel is quick, it's easy, and it's the best way to add a little bit more energy to Sundays. So are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com, and that's where you place your first $5 bet. Thanks as always for making Locked On Kraken a part of your daily destination. Erica L. Ayala here, your host of Locked On Kraken. Again, dropped some ring here. Super excited that I will be covering the Olympics. This will be my 3rd Olympics overall, my 2nd Winter Olympics, and I've got some pretty cool stuff in the works, including, of course, covering any Kraken, future, former, present, that will be there. And I know I've been talking about it, but Joey Decord, we talked about his call up to the USA Hockey Olympic camp, kind of their preparation camp. We've talked about Maddie Beniers. I got to cover Maddie Beniers at the last Olympics, and Oscar Molgaard. Sometimes he goes by Oscar Fisker Molgaard. Sometimes it's just Oscar Molgaard. Will he be someone? Oliver Bjorkstrand is going to be there, we know. Philip Grubauer will be an Olympian, we know. But I thought this was a really cool article that Jeff Baker has up on the Seattle Kraken website. Walking together forever as champions. Kraken center Maddie Beniers, goalie Joey Decord, and equipment manager Jeff Camilio reflect on being part of a Team USA squad that in May captured the first IIHF World Championship by this country, the United States, in 92 years. Wow. And so this article, I'm not going to read the whole thing verbatim. If you haven't read Jeff Baker's work before, you absolutely should. So much history. I love stuff like this. Like I said, I'm a sucker for the international game. I came into learning to love hockey through women's hockey first, then the international game, and kind of backtracked my way into the NHL. So I always see things more through an international lens. And so what I love is that Jeff gets into the world championships history. He gets into, that for so long, world championships have been dominated by European teams. And that's why it's been 92 years between gold medals for the United States at an IIHF World Championships. Now, there have been Olympic medals in between there, including the Miracle on Ice. And we've seen, of course, World Juniors. Maddie Beniers has won at the younger stage as well. But World Championships is just something a little bit different. And of course, there are differences in the ice, European ice versus NHL ice. There's a lot more east-west because the rink, the rink is wider. It's a wink. It's a wider rink. The rink is wider. And as a goaltender, that impacts angles, that impacts as a defenseman, your angles, or a defender if you're looking at the women's game. I love talking about those things with athletes. But the one piece of this article that I found fascinating, I mean, there were a lot of things, including that Camilio, Beniers, and of course Decord give their little anecdotes and things about what the team did and getting to travel throughout Europe with Team USA. But the article opens, and of course playing against Philip Grubauer, Joey Dax talking about that. But the article opens up in a really interesting way that I think could be fascinating and might be something that I kind of grab for us here at Locked on Kraken. I'm going to read the opening part of this article. Kraken goalie Joey Decord sat in a Dusseldorf hotel meeting room last April with 24 other NHL players staring transfixed at the numbers 1933 projected on a video screen. The first Team USA meeting in Germany ahead of the IIHF Men's World Hockey Championship in May saw head coach Ryan Wasowski give a PowerPoint presentation on various on-ice systems when a slide containing the numbers suddenly appeared. Others in the room with Decord, including Kraken center Maddie Beniers, watched silently as Wasowski, who coaches the San Jose Sharks, asked the players whether they knew what 1933 meant. And so the article goes on to say that it's not 1933, but it is a year, 1933. That was the last year that USA Hockey won a men's, I want to point that out because the women have been crushing it, a men's IIHF World Championship. And so Jeff goes on to write, Beniers remembers how seeing the date hammered home a point. Sure, players already knew that generations had passed since the country's only world title, men's world title. I added the men's part. It's not in Jeff's article. And sure, an automatic world championship had been awarded to the U.S. in 1960 after winning the country's first Winter Olympic gold, with the IIHF back then not holding a separate world tournament during the Olympic years. But to not win the actual tournament in nearly a century, especially 45 years after the second Olympic gold miracle on ice, he goes on to effectively say, that's crazy. Beniers said, quote, I mean, it's pretty unbelievable at first. Like, seriously, we haven't won this thing in 92 years? We're supposed to be one of the best nations. It was a message to us, and it set the tone right away. All right. I think we know what the Kraken need to do. Actually, it's not on this collar. It's the coordinates. I forgot. The 1917 is on the Winter Classic collar. I think maybe the Kraken need to take a page out of USA Hockey's book. 1917. Now, the historical context also a little bit murky, a little bit different. Obviously, it wasn't the Seattle Kraken. It was the Seattle Metropolitans, and their Stanley Cup win predated even the National Hockey League as we know it now. But the sentiment is there. I think there is history in Seattle hockey. And the Kraken are embarking on building and curating their own history. And this is season number 5. There is a lot on the line. And I know I talk a lot about my doubts and the things that burn my grits, grind my gears, keep me up late at night worrying about this team. And I got to tell you, the historical context of the Seattle hockey scene, winning a Stanley Cup before the NHL was even a thing, and having an opportunity to cover this team as they embark on winning their first Stanley Cup. Oh my gosh. Like, I live for stuff like that. I live for it. That's what sports is about. And so I loved that story. Again, go check out the article from Jeff Baker. We're going to talk about some other things that Jeff and the crew have cooked up for you ahead of rookie camp, which starts on Thursday. But I just thought that article was great, and I want to take a piece of it. I want to take some of that. And is there a way that the Kraken can start to really lean into that history? I know a lot of people have said, well, how do we kind of lean into the history when it comes to the unis? I mean, I still think these alternates are pretty freaking sick. I mean, come on. I think these go so hard. I cannot wait. I cannot freaking wait to see one in the flesh. But I would love the Kraken to find their version of that. And maybe you don't go all the way back to 1917. Maybe you start reflecting on moments in Kraken history. And on the Locked On Kraken show, we're going to do that. We have another 3-parter coming up where we're going to talk about where are they now, the inaugural season roster. If you missed it, we already did a 3-part series. Where are they now? Talking about the expansion draft players, but not all of those players ended up on the inaugural roster. And we'll talk about some of the players that weren't taken in the expansion draft who ended up on the inaugural team, and some are still around, like Philip Grubauer. But, we'll talk about Philip in due time as a part of that inaugural season, of course. But I just think it's a cool opportunity. I love that story. I loved hearing that story, Jeff, and having Jeff tell it in the way that he did, because there's a huge opportunity to lean into the history, to have this roster galvanized behind something bigger and more significant than even them, and to be able to snatch a part of history and own it, I think is so cool. So I don't know. Are we going to have to start plastering 1917 everywhere? Just 1917, 1917, just to remind folks that the Seattle Kraken come from a history of Stanley Cup champions and the circumstances behind that. I mean, for those who've been around the show for a while, I'm going to have to revisit this, but I did a deep dive into, some of the similarities between the Metropolitans around the time they won their Stanley Cup versus the Seattle Kraken as they were becoming and being onboarded into the NHL era during a pandemic. Okay, lest we forget. So that's fascinating history as well. I'm a super I nerd out happily, gladly on history. I think it's phenomenal. I think learning from history is critical, including when you're going through hard things and hard moments in time. Everything old is new again, and everything new is influenced, if not directly, indirectly, by something that has happened in the past. So we're gonna have to maybe do another deep dive series where I get into, when I get into that history again, because I had a lot of fun with that when we opened the show, and I'd love to get back to it. Anyway, check out that article, Jeff Baker talking to Maddie and Joey about that world championship team. And I think it could be a cool motivator. I'm very curious to see what Lane Lambert has cooking on that front, or maybe it'll come from the players. Like, how are they embracing that? Is it something that they think about? Stay tuned as I kind of put out some feelers there. But coming up next on Locked on Kraken, we're going to head to one of our other Seattle Kraken writers, and that's going to be Bob Condor. And he also talks about rookie camp, getting ready for rookie camp. What do you need to know about dates and times, but also who are some players that are coming in and what are the expectations? What have some of these young rookies been doing since the last time they were with the organization, and what can we expect from rookie camp? We'll get into that as we close out today's Tuesday episode of Locked on Kraken. Thanks as always for making Locked on Kraken a part of your daily destination, whether we're your first listen, your midday listen, or your late night listen. Either way, thank you for joining. If you're not already subscribed for Meeting for the First Time, hello. Hi there, YouTubers or folks listening on audio. I hope you are driving safely or getting your favorite foods at your local grocery store, or whatever the vibe is. Maybe you're on your way to partake in some hockey yourself. Either way, thank you so much for tuning in. And we've got another season coming up. So I talked a little bit about some additional new threats, including who's someone who's got a shot that the Kraken are going to want in the NHL sooner rather than later. We talked about Maddie Beniers and Joey Decord reflecting on just the importance of knowing your history and reflecting on, how long it's been between, in this case, world championships for USA Hockey. And I told you my thoughts on if that could be a motivating force for this Kraken team. And you're probably going to hear me talk about that more on the show. But now I want to go to another article over on NHL.com/Kraken. Drop the puck. Prospects get season started. Rookie camp begins midweek with medical and fitness testing. Our preview as prospects hit the ice Thursday and Friday before the weekend prospects showcase game against the Vancouver Rookies. All right. So there will be 17 forwards, 9 defensemen, and a pair of goalies that will hit the ice on Thursday for the 2025 rookie camp, Bob writes. And there's going to be a Saturday matchup against Vancouver, a NHL Prospects Showcase. They're really billing this one big time at Angel of the Winds Arena, September 13th at 6 p.m. You can get your tickets over on Ticketmaster. But this is what Jason Botterill had to say about the rookie showcase or the prospects showcase. The prospects showcase is a great way for fans to see some of our top young players up close and get a glimpse of our of the future of our team. These games are always high energy, and we are excited to share the Kraken experience with our fans up north. Talking about not north in Canada, but the fans in Everett. And there are a lot of different things that are happening at this camp, including players who've already made their NHL debut, like Jacob Melanson, Logan Morrison, excuse me, who was another player that John Barr from Sound of Hockey thought could be interesting and maybe a sleeper pick to have a few more NHL games under his belt. Yanni Newman, Ryan Winterton, and Villiers Ottavainen, Nike Koko, and Victor Osman. Victor Osman, I called his game. I think I played that clip right on the show. I called a game of his when he played Boston College, I should say, when he was with Maine. Anyway, another thing that Bob writes in his article, I'm not going to read it verbatim, but he talks about how this is a taxing season. It's kind of truncated because of the Olympic break. And we've already talked about some of the back-to-backs, including there's going to be a back-to-back in preseason. So we're definitely going to keep an eye on the back-to-back records. But, it's an opportunity. And a lot of these guys, it's not so much for their opportunity to make an NHL squad, but it's about positioning themselves to be a mainstay on an AHL team. For some of them, even maybe they're on the short list of call-ups. But this is what our coach over for the Coachella Valley Firebirds had to say. Coach Laxdal said that young guys just drafted and going back to juniors, they will feel the game slow down after attending an NHL camp. So that's huge, right? And then he goes on to say, I remember from my own experience and from seeing it as a coach, they will see the game better after being in camp. It's another chance for younger players to live the Kraken culture. Somebody like Jake O'Brien can make a statement about why he was picked high in the draft, number 8 overall. They will all want to absorb as much as they can for future use. And we're expecting to hear from Laxdal. He will be on hand, especially for the rookie camp, the rookie part of that. Derek Laxdal is our AHL coach, of course, taking over last year. And so, the other part of this is, of course, some of the players that we talked about yesterday. And so we're talking about Ottavainen. I mean, I didn't talk about Ottavainen that much yesterday, but I mentioned that he was on that NHL roster, one of the call-ups later in the season. He's someone to keep an eye on. Logan Morrison, we talked about. Ryan Winterton, I didn't talk about enough, probably. Someone else along there with Berkeley Catton, Yanni Newman, etc. And so what the Kraken are looking for, Laxdal particularly mentioned Newman and Furcus, and those guys might help set the pace for, like, quote unquote pro capabilities. He's looking for growth and maturity from those two and to see what they can do on the ice. So he says, Coach Laxdal, this is Laxdal. We will have 6 forward lines, 9 D-men. So we will keep drills and other practice work for about an hour each day. He says no scrimmages. Everyone will get in at least one game this coming weekend. And he says they're excited about getting it going. So this is about getting their legs going. For some, the evaluation process is very acute. It's very specific. For others, it's more of, hey, get your feet wet. So I think that's going to be huge. The schedule for the Seattle Kraken, we've mentioned it a few times, but the Kraken will open rookie camp on Thursday. And so rookie camp, and again, we'll have this on our social media accounts and on our YouTube page. We have some graphics that we have together. If you ever want to know what the schedule for the day is, make sure you're checking out Locked On Kraken on TikTok. We are going to have our IG and Twitter accounts running again. And of course, you can check out the community pages and the YouTube shorts, but we're going to have the day-by-day schedule for you and any content coming from that day, whether it's original content coming from Locked On Kraken or some of the content that's shared through the Seattle Kraken. We're going to have all of that organized for you. But the games, of course, we're talking about it's that game in Everett, which is going to be against the Vancouver Prospects, so a Pacific Division squad. And, that's going to be on Saturday. That's Saturday, September 13th, 6 p.m. Pacific time. Ticketmaster is where you can find those particular tickets. But when we look at the rest of the schedule, the Seattle Kraken also have something coming up on the 14th. So on the 14th, the Kraken will have a prospect showcase game. That's going to be against Vancouver, and it's going to be at Kraken Community Iceplex. So they play on the 13th. That's the big game in Everett at Angel of the Winds Arena. And then a 4 p.m. prospects showcase game on Sunday, September 14th. So pretty early into rookie camp. And then the rookie portion of camp will have the day off on Monday. They hit the ice again on Tuesday, September 16th, before everybody is, and some of the older guys, the veterans, the NHL players, they'll be around by Monday, Tuesday, if not sooner. I mean, I'm sure they're already in town, but Thursday, September 18th is when things really pop off for main camp. We're going to have our blue group and our white group. We don't have the rosters for the breakdown there yet, but once we get that, I will let you know. So make sure you stay locked on Kraken. Erica L. Ayala, your host of Locked On Kraken. I will be touching down in Seattle and be there for like a month. So we've got a lot of content planned. We're super excited. Joe Dabney is expected to join. Not my business to tell, but if you have some extra love to share, send it to Joe and her family. And as always, be kind to yourselves, be kind to one another, hold fast, stay true, and loud and proud we say, let's go Kraken. We'll start our deep dive into where are they now, the inaugural Seattle Kraken roster. That will start tomorrow. Until the next episode, again, be kind to yourself, be kind to others, and I will catch you on the next episode. Peace out, everybody.